The Bitcoin ETF just released, and you are wondering what is the best Bitcoin ETF to choose? What are the differences between all these ETFs? In this video, we're going to go into that and see if it makes sense to invest in these Bitcoin ETFs. As usual, though, none of this is financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor.
Knowledge.
Now, I'm not going to go into what is a Bitcoin ETF. You really should have known that by now. The question is, why should I invest in one of these Bitcoin ETFs versus another one? And there are 11 funds we can choose from right now, which is a confusing point. So there are a couple main differences we need to look at. The first is, of course, the expense ratios for these fees, how much they charge you to hold it. And when we look at all these different ETFs, I'm on CNBC right now. I'll put this link in the description to the article. You can see they are really pretty comparable. 0.2% for the Bitwise, 0.21 for ARK, 0.25% for Fidelity, 0.25 for iShares, right? Some of them have asterisks, and that's because on some of these ETFs, they won't charge you for the first amount invested. So we can see, like right here, the fee is waived into August 1st, 2024 for the Fidelity fund. If we look at ARK, management fee is waived until July 10th or until assets reach $1 billion. So a lot of these fees are pretty comparable, except for the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, which is 1.5%, the HashDex Bitcoin ETF, which is 0.94%. Now, keep in mind, the HashDex Bitcoin ETF, the DeFi, this is not a spot ETF. This is a futures ETF, so they're not holding spot for you. So if you want a spot ETF, meaning the company is holding the Bitcoin for you, this is a futures contract. Those are two very different things. So keep that in mind when you're looking at that. So if you don't know about futures, if you don't know what futures are, if you don't care about that, the HashDex, the ticker DeFi, that's not for you, dude. Look at one of the other ones, okay? So really, we have to look at these main ones. Assuming you don't want a futures contract, you probably don't want this Grayscale because it's 1.5%. Why should I choose one of these over the other when each one is pretty minimal fees and you might even get some cheap fees if they don't charge you in the future? But there's somewhat things we got to look at besides the fees. This piece right here is one of the main things you need to keep in mind when looking at the fees. Now, most of these companies are not actually going to hold the Bitcoin for you. You can see Grayscale is going to host their Bitcoin on Coinbase. ARK is going to host their Bitcoin on Coinbase. BlackRock is going to host their Bitcoin on Coinbase. So really, when you're looking at these ETFs, you need to decide how much counterparty risk do you want. Do you trust Coinbase to hold your Bitcoin? I have some money on Coinbase, but it doesn't mean that it'll be safe in the future. We can look at Van Eck. That's the Gemini. They hold money on Gemini. Now, personally for me, if you go on Reddit, there's plenty of stories of people that cannot withdraw their funds from Gemini. And I've had that during the last bull run as well. Well, I guess I should say during the end of the bull run, towards the bear market, right? So a lot of people couldn't withdraw funds from Gemini. So for me, it's like Gemini has been a little shady. They had some bad counterparty risk. So I don't really know if I'm going to go with this Van Eck ETF. Especially even though it's only 0.25%, and it does definitely have the best ticker, HODL. Come on, guys, that's pretty good. So the ticker doesn't do it for me, and then I have that risk on Gemini. That's just me, though, not financial advice. And then you have to consider all of these are hosted on Coinbase. There's only one fund that is self-custody, and that's Fidelity. So do you trust Fidelity more than Coinbase to host the Bitcoin? That's a question for you, a question only you can answer and maybe do some more research on. And that's going to be one of those big ideas. The fees are pretty negligible, as you can see. Don't really worry about a 0.25%, guys, on your Bitcoin. Come on. We're expecting this thing to double in price. Don't worry about 0.25%. Be like, oh, I got to get 0.2%. That's silly. Make sure your risk is on par. Do you trust Fidelity more or do you trust Coinbase more? This is going to be one of those bigger ideas you really need to focus on. So which one am I going to buy? And I am going to buy some because I have money in my Roth. I have money in my traditional IRA. I want some exposure to Bitcoin in my retirement funds. So for me, it makes sense. I'm going to spread the risk. I'm going to spread the risk. I'm going to buy some Fidelity because they have self-custody of the Bitcoin. And then I'm also going to buy the Bitwise Bitcoin ETF because it does have the lowest expense ratio. So if I'm going to choose two, I'm personally going to do Fidelity and then Bitwise, even though it's hosted on Coinbase, because it has the lowest expense ratio. So that way I can spread my risk between Fidelity's self-custody and Coinbase's custody as well. But there's really one major thing that's going to make me go all out on one of these ETFs in the future. Will any of these host options? Imagine a leap on Bitcoin Imagine credit spreads on Bitcoin. Imagine out of the money calls on Bitcoin this upcoming bull run. I mean, degenerate, yes. Gambly, yes. But a high probability of making you a lot of money. But none of these, as we can see, have an options chain yet. I don't know if they will ever have an options chain. I don't know how it's going to go. But we'll see if any of these do get options, and that'll probably be the main one I trade and the main one I hold. So keep these all in mind when you're trying to decide which Bitcoin ETF do you want to hold. Which one do you plan on buying, or do you plan on buying any? Make sure to comment down below, because I think this is a great opportunity for your retirement funds now. But if you're not sure if you should even be buying Bitcoin right now, considering the price, make sure you check out this video right here. Peace.